Well, good morning. Welcome to Layton Bethel. Special welcome to our video audience. It's good to hear from you. Heard from somebody from Galveston, Texas this week. Haven't been there myself in over 40 years, so it's always good to hear from. It's good to hear from you. You can find out more things about Layton Bethel on our website, laytonbethel.org. My name is Sherwin. I'm the pastor here. We have two services every Sunday, and one at 9, one at 11, and you're welcome to join us there. Today we are talking about currency for the soul, and I have the wonderful Pontiac GTO, the 1969 GTO up there. Just as an illustration, it's an interesting car. I've been talking about the reporting for duty lately, and again, just how that happened is my wife was sleeping in her recliner in another room. I was in my office. It was about 10 o'clock at night. Came around the corner, and there was some show on TV of a guy in a suit sitting behind a desk. And you should never trust somebody who wears a suit, okay? But then this guy in a military uniform came up and said, "At your service, sir." And the thought struck me that if we prayed that way, our prayers would be much more effective. Instead of coming to God with a grocery list of things that we like to whine about, just say, "Hey, I'm at your service, sir. What can I do for you?" Now, those of you who've been in the military know that you can't report for duty to two sides. I kind of teased Jan Ream about that in the first service because he was military police during the Vietnam era, and I said, "Did you ever report for duty to the Viet Cong?" And he replied, "No." And I said, "Well, thanks for telling me that. Now you can go back to sleep." But he enjoyed that, sort of thing. The question today is, who am I reporting to? When I say reporting for duty. Because, us humans are not very good at multitasking. We sometimes think we are, but we're really not very good at it. When I drove for United Parcel, they said no radios in the delivery trucks, which I thought was kind of weird. That was the summer of Peter Frampton Live. I had to have, radios. And they said no. And the reason was one boss that I had said, "You going to deliver packages or you going to listen to the radio? You can't do both." I was there for the paycheck, so I didn't listen to the radio. But we're not good at multitasking. We have to set our priorities for what we want to do. So the question I'm going to ask you today is, who are you reporting for duty to? Is it the devil? Is it your spouse? No, they're not the same thing. Is it your family that you report to duty for? Is it your boss? Your bank account? Yourself? Or several of these things? Or are you going to report for duty to Jesus, the rightful Lord and Master? When you do report to him, you will find amazing freedom. Life is better if you do that. Last couple of months, I found that there's two statements that if I make them right away in the morning, my whole day goes better. And I'm not a morning person, okay? I'd just soon not talk to anybody until at least 8 or 9 cups of coffee, and I'm just not a morning person. But if I make these two statements, everything changes. I'll start out by saying, "This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it." And say, "Reporting for duty, sir." Changes everything. And this relates to how we manage money, too. And Jesus had quite a bit to say about that, and that's what I want to talk about today. First thing I want to talk about is what a hyperbole is. It's important that we understand that. Hyperbole is an exaggerated statement or claims not meant to be taken literally. That's how the rabbis taught. We use hyperboles all the time. It's like, last night at Little Caesars, I had to wait for 4 or 5 hours. Well, that's not true. I only had to wait 1 hour and 15 minutes. Still a little mad about that. But that's what a hyperbole is. It's an exaggeration. And Jesus certainly used those as teaching tools. So don't take his stuff literally, just take it the way he intended it to be taken. And this is what he had to say about money today. He says, don't store up treasures on earth. Moths and rust can destroy them, and thieves can break in and steal them. Instead, store up your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy them, and thieves cannot break in and steal them. Your heart will always be where your treasure is. So, don't store treasures on earth. Does that mean Jesus was against savings and investments? No. But he is reminding us that we really don't own anything. That title to that house that you're living in, if you own the house, a few years somebody else going to own that house, because you're not going to live forever. Jesus was making the point that we don't own anything, and that everything that we have will go to someone else in just a few years, unless it rusts away or someone steals it. Or, our kids will get it, most likely. And that troubles me greatly. I have an extensive music collection, and I have everything backed up on CD. I have over 20 versions, I checked between the services, of the song Brown Sugar by the Stones. I am a fanatic of that. What's going to happen to all those CDs? My kids will probably throw them at the dog and, use them as frisbees. I don't know, but it rips me up to think that might happen. Those CDs are worth a lot to me, but not to my kids. See, what Jesus is saying is that giving is a better investment than what you can invest in on this earth. It's better than a Roth IRA. Now, the Roth IRA will help in this life, but it provides no currency for the next. My daughter's about to get her BSN and become a registered nurse. And nurses traditionally don't have very good retirement programs. So I've encouraged her to set up a Roth IRA and start doing it right away when she's still in college, and she did. And that hopefully will help her when she's my age and wants to retire. But giving, the Roth IRA is only going to help you while you're still sucking air. But giving is currency for the next life. It's an investment for the next life. Treasure in heaven is what Jesus calls it. And then Jesus says, your heart will always be where your treasure is. And that's true. I want to talk to you about two things to illustrate this. One is lawn care and the other is smoking meat. I hate lawn care. Absolutely can't stand it. Where I grew up, that was women's work. I know that sounds terribly sexist. I don't mean to be sexist, but these farmers are not going to be seen on these itty-bitty little tractors. They ride around in these $300,000 machines all day. They're not going to be seen on a little 10-horse tractor. That was why God gave them daughters or wives. They weren't going to be seen on those miserable little things. And I've inherited that disdain. So I bought a mower. It's a Cub Cadet, so I figured I better buy a trailer too, because it's going to be breaking down all the time. So I did that. It's true, it does break down all the time, 3 times in the first 2 years. But I hate doing lawn work. And I get super frustrated when I have to spend time on it. I would leave the leaves lay until spring and hopefully they blow away. I don't like to do it. My heart's not in it. But smoking meat. I have 3 smokers. And I'm always trying new recipes. I don't mind spending time on that. My heart is in it. And I take Lipitor, so it shouldn't hurt my heart. But the thing is, that's something I'm in. If you treasure your service to Jesus above all else, you won't despair investing in it. And Jesus goes on with this. He says, your eyes are a window for your body. When they are good, you have all the light you need. But when your eyes are bad, everything is dark. If the light inside you is dark, you are surely in the dark. So you look for, what he's saying here is you look for what's important to you. Now, we like to shop at Costco. One of our daughters used to live right near there, so we got in the habit of every couple of weeks we make a Costco run. And it's a good deal, but Diane and I never want to shop in the same place because we have very different interests. And I want to look at certain things, I'm trying to figure out what's the best cut of meat they have that day. And she's looking at other things like frozen broccoli, which is good to feed the horses. And, that sort of thing. So I have to find her. Well, I've learned that if I get in my head what she's wearing, I can find her a lot more easily. Last time we were there, she's wearing a pink shirt. And all I had to do is look for this gal in a pink shirt. I was surprised how many people were wearing pink shirts in Costco. But I was able to find her. See, if you look for it, you can find it. If you're looking for selfish things, you will find them. Your eye will be dark. Another instance just happened the last couple of weeks is I'm talking to people, and I usually have between 12 and 17 individual appointments a week, so I get to hear lots of stories. And I was hearing about drug problems in Muskegon. And I was surprised about that. They said that there's lots of opiates around, and they're relatively cheap, but it's a much better deal if you want to get stoned to get heroin, because it's actually cheaper. Now, then they were telling, I said, I don't know how to get opiates, and I wouldn't know where to go. And this particular young man said to me, give me $50 and in 20 minutes, I'll be back with some. And that was right, sitting in my office just upstairs here. So they're around, and it illustrates that your eye finds what is important to you. If I wanted the opiates, I've got a contact now, but the thing is that it's really awkward saying that with a policeman looking right at me, but I'm not going to do it. But too, how prevalent those things are in this community. You had to have spent hours and hours on that. So my hat's off to you. But it is a real problem. And I'm just using this as an illustration. If you're looking for it, you can find it. If you're not looking for it, you can't find it. I honestly can't tell you where to find it in this community. Your eye finds what Jesus is saying here. Your eye finds what is important to you. And then Jesus goes on and says this, you cannot be the slave of two masters. You will like the one more than the other, or be more loyal to one than the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, the very first professor I had in studying the Gospel of Matthew in the Greek language said that this verse right here, verse 24, is proof that Jesus was never married. He says, you cannot serve two masters. At the time, I thought it was funny. But that's what he offered as proof. And he said, decide, what Jesus is really saying here is, decide what is your highest priority. You're going to serve God, you're going to serve something else. Who are you reporting for duty to? You're going to serve him with your time, serve him with your money, whatever, but are you going to serve him? If you think about money, how many people do you trust that you would hand your wallet to? How many could you do that? I can hand it to my wife. She takes it even if I don't hand it to her. So, you get used to that. But how many people do you really trust enough to hand your wallet to? Would you hand it to Jesus? It's kind of like reporting for duty. We've had a personal giving plan for years with 10% as the goal. It's what I do. I'm old school. I base it on the income of the previous month, and then take 10% of that, divide it by 4, and write out checks for the next month. And it turns out in the course of a given year, Diane and I are always giving more than 10%. And I have no regrets of that, even on the days when I couldn't afford it. Because I realize it's building treasure in heaven, it's giving me currency for the soul. But more importantly, it has taught me over the years to have less attachment to things. And so even if the church doesn't need me to give to it, I need to give for my own sake. And that's what's kept us going all this time. And the same thing for time. And just a personal issue on that. Shortly after I came to Laketon Bethel, I decided to enroll in a doctoral program, and I did go through that. And one of the things we had to do was time studies for pastors. And I'd never done that before because we don't push a time clock or anything. So I started doing it, and I still do that to this day, where I kept track of everything that I did and how much time I put into it. I said, this is going to burn me out because I put in a lot of hours. And the guy leading it said, well, it's good for you. Here's what you do. Realize this church is paying you for 40 hours a week. That's fair. And anything else that you put in is donated time. It's a gift. I said, shoot, I got 40 hours in by Thursday afternoon. And they said, well, then what you do on weekends, you're doing as a volunteer. And that's why I have fun with these worship services. I'm doing this as a volunteer. I had my time in by noon on Friday. I was slacking a little this week. But this is volunteers for me, and it really makes things interesting. Jesus talked about that, how to handle our money. I put this slide together I figured I'd find out who all the Hollanders were. They'd all perk up when they saw this. But, as Jesus said, your eye will find what's important to you. And what we really need, with our time to give that away, we need a treasure in heaven. And here's the thing. The kingdom of heaven needs you. You were created for a purpose. There's no retirement plan from God's purpose. You're called to do this, to do His work. With your time, with your financial gifts. Now, of course, the church needs money all the time. It takes a lot of cash to run this. But what's more important is you need to give. Because in giving, you get the proper perspective on your worldly wealth. And as Jesus says, you do build that treasure in heaven. So every 2 or 3 years, I'm going to repeat this just so that people keep it in the front of our minds. But there is something unique that only you can do for the kingdom of heaven. And you need to figure out what that is and do it. Because that's why you were created. And you will be building treasure in heaven. So, to our video audience, as always, thanks for listening. I'm going to take an offering here now, so just be glad you're watching it on video. And we'll see you next week.